There was basically no one standing between the president and New York Times reporter Michael Schmidt last week when he landed his exclusive interview at Trump's golf club. So why, many people wondered, wasn't he tougher on the president? As Times reporter Michael Schmidt explains, the circumstances of his exclusive with the president were a little unusual.
This has been a lightly staffed trip compared to, when President Obama would go on vacation. It seems like there was a lot more staffers around.
So to Schmidt's surprise, the president was happy to oblige, calling him over for an impromptu interview.
He believes he is the best person to carry out his message. And I think it's hard for him to turn down opportunities like that.
And the president made some news, saying he believes special counsel Robert Mueller will treat him fairly in the Russian investigation, admitting he has gone soft on trade with China in hopes China will get tough on North Korea. And he said he never thought Roy Moore would win Alabama. Still, reaction to the interview was harsh in some quarters.
There's been a fair amount of Monday morning quarterbacking about your interview with the president.
The media just went nutsoid over that whole, and I don't get it.
Well, not everyone in the media, but some for sure. Many readers were upset, too, basically saying Schmidt didn't ask any follow-ups. But Schmidt defends his own style, saying it wasn't his job to get in the way.
I said, okay, I'm going to ask these questions, and I'm going to get the ball rolling and just kind of sit back and listen.
After all, this might have been the alternative.
It's enough. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I could see Trump blowing him off. I'm going to cut Michael Schmidt some quarter on this. First of all, he wasn't sure he was going to get an interview. He was with a good friend of Trump's, Ruddy, I think his name was, and he called him over. He was actually kneeling on the floor. Trump was still sitting at his lunch table, so it was this very awkward, and he was trying to take notes, and he got out his recorder and all that. So it wasn't like this formal sit-down where he had questions and follow-ups. I mean, he was just on the fly. Yeah. I think in that circumstance, I would have done the same thing. Also, I think that Trump was trying to reach out. This is the New York Times reporter. He knew darn well what he was doing there. So he probably thought he was going to get what he got, and he did.
Look, I see both sides of this. I think whenever you're around the president or covering the president, you always have questions ready because you hope that there will be a moment like that when they do call you over and you can ask an intelligent question. So you always have these questions in your back pocket ready to pull out at any time. On the other hand, I do think that it is a style thing. There are times when you could just let someone throw them, these softball questions and then see where they go with it. And it can be quite revealing sometimes when people say crazy things or, I thought it was pretty revealing. And how can you counter some of the claims like, I'm the best, at understanding how legislation is done or something like that of any president? I mean, what are you going to say? No, you're not. I think that would be very difficult. When I was looking over this story, one thing came to mind. Larry King was always criticized for not being a tough journalist, and he really wasn't. I mean, he didn't even prepare for his interviews. He would just listen and ask a softball question. But sometimes there would be something revealing that would come out of it because people were relaxed. They weren't expecting that missile. And so I think it's a style thing and can be effective sometimes.
Yeah. It's interesting to think of this in the context of the push for greater transparency by news organizations, because the reason for the pushback is that the Times posted a full transcript of the interview. If they had just run a regular story without the transcript attached, then they wouldn't have had the opening for that pushback. I think that you're right that there are certainly different styles of interviewing. I mean, I think we've all done interviews that sometimes you need to lead with something hard and sometimes you lead with something soft and move forward. And I do think we have enough past experience with how Donald Trump performs in interviews to think it's probably not going to, he's not going to buckle on the third follow-up and say, well, gosh darn it, I think you're right, Michael. All that said, I do think that there are now post the sort of trouble with the Russia investigation, there are so few opportunities to get Trump directly in a one-on-one conversation that I think the stakes are a little bit higher. I mean, just this week, he did a video remote into the daily news briefing, even though he was in the White House, because he didn't want to take questions. He didn't want, he wanted to be in the present in the space, but not taking questions. This is a administration we just don't know how to cover really yet.
I didn't think the interview was that bad in and of itself. I did think it was an example of a certain type of timid addiction to access journalism that the Times has shown, which I wrote about for my WGBH News column this week. I do want to give a shout out to Michael Schmidt for turning around and producing earlier this week one of the most significant pieces of reporting on the Russia investigation, on reporting that President Trump ordered his White House counsel to tell Jeff Sessions, do not recuse yourself from the Russia investigation. It was a remarkable piece of journalism. So, the Times drives us crazy sometimes, and yet it remains absolutely indispensable.
So what I would say is that I can be on both sides, and I get style. However, this is a guy, Michael Schmidt, who is an extremely talented reporter who's been all over this.
Yes.
There is at least one follow-up you could do that in that moment you don't have to prepare for. All he does is eat, breathe, and sleep this stuff. He's got those facts like this. And even if the follow-up was nothing more than to say, when he said, I think Mueller will be fair, if you had said, well, the rest of your people are saying he's not going to be fair, how is it that you come to this conclusion? That's not even hard-hitting, but that's a follow-up. Come on, Michael. Something needed to happen. And yet I understand being in the moment and trying to grab it. And I will say, unless you've been in there like the rest of us here at this table, and you're looking down the face of somebody where you're about to ask some real ugly questions, you don't really get a chance to judge. Since I've done that, I'm judging.
I know. People used to email me all the time and say, why didn't I jump down Tom Finneran's throat or something? It's like, you try it when they're sitting right there.
Right.